Here we'll call the meeting in order. The Newman City Council and Newman Redevelopment Agency, the regular meeting of November 8th, 2005. Please stand for the pledge and the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Higher heads. Thank you for allowing us to meet this evening. Please help us make the right decision for the city of Newman. Amen. Roll call, please.
Present.
Present.
Present. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Ceremonial matters. We have none. Items from the public, non-agenda items. If anybody has anything that is not on the posted agenda, that would be the time to step forward. Seeing nothing. Agenda items, when the item comes before us, if you'd like to comment, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and try to keep your comments to under 3 minutes. Number 8, public hearings, we have none. Number 9, consent calendar. Item A, approval of warrants. Item B, approval of minutes of the October 25th, 2005 regular meeting. Item C, adopt resolution number 2005, next to number, resolution rescinding resolution number 2005-31, resolution delegating authority to the city manager to make determinations under section 21152C. Questions on? Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 10 under regular business, update by Ecologic on water and wastewater options. Professor, what we're going to do is, as Mr. Stoll does his presentation, if any of the council members have a question at the time he's doing it, that's fine. But the public, we're going to hold the comments to the end, and we'll have everybody that has a question will be able to ask their question. But this way the professor gets through his whole presentation, and if any of the council members do not understand a certain item as we're going, that's fine. Public in the end.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And again, I of course get all very excited, so if I don't notice, just keep waving or saying, hey you. And I was before you the last time a couple of months back, and we've made a lot of progress. And while we were preparing the PowerPoint and wrapping up the reports for John and for Ernie, I kept thinking to myself, well, how would I describe this? And unfortunately, it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's like a Clint Eastwood movie in a way. And anytime I hear the word bad, I just stop right there. Oh, Mike. I just stop right there, and we may as well talk about that. And the answer is, looking at all the available data to date, the city is looking at a multi-million-dollar expenditure for existing residents, not new growth, just existing residents to come into compliance. And another thing that at least I myself, in talking about studies that I would say is bad, I find a bit disturbing, only in the sense that the city's trying to make progress, is that we were charged with looking at available data and looking at available analysis to see if alternatives, credible alternatives existed, and not to generate new information or new data, only new hypotheses based on what was available. And so we've gone through a lot of the data, and when one looks at those data in the context of a multi-million-dollar decision, in my opinion, they're not adequate. And so we actually before as the council moves to actually start talking about financial planning, etc., we will need, we the city, because I may be gone. I mean, my work is finishing. The city will probably want to get more data, and the regional board, on a completely parallel track, I was speaking with them last week about it. They were saying they're going to be modifying the wastewater reported waste discharge monitoring reporting program to actually include monitoring wells as well. So there was actually a certain amount of closure. But any time a city goes about doing a study in an effort and it results in a recommendation of more study, that's a little less than I like to do. But again, we're talking about a major financial commitment, and therefore we want to make sure we have the best data available to make that decision. And again, I would comment, the poorer the data we have, the more overly conservative the regional board has to be. And so when we talk about getting more data, It improves the city's database and therefore its negotiation position with the regional board and the ultimate expenditure of money. So I think the city is going to be gathering more money to save a heck of a lot more money. It's just not the way I normally like a study to end up, is recommending another study, whether by me or anybody else. So with that, again, the good, the bad, the ugly. We've got the bad out of the way. There's the ugly. Last time we left off, you recall, we were talking about this. This is where, big road map, we were going down here, going down there, trying to figure out what was best. And oh, well, thank you. I'm going to try and make this thing work. Let's talk about the progress. And again, we've got the Greek little. We're not sure. Good news and bad news. That's why we had. Why was the Greek trying to map? The first thing was that I don't need to back up. But the first thing, the council, you have this in progress. It does not appear that we're going to get relief from the regional board under certain aspects of the water code. And normally that would have me hopping mad and screaming, I'm getting my attorney. In this case, because this is an important issue, I want to go over that with you, because I think in the end you'll say, yes, I don't think we necessarily want to go there unless we must as a last resort. The sections of the water code that are critical include one that states that each regional board, and this is a law, this isn't regulation, this is the water code, shall prescribe water reclamation requirements when you're reclaiming the water. And Lance is out there reclaiming the water, therefore we should have water reclamation requirements. We don't. We have waste discharge requirements. Now, again, the legal beagles might say, yeah, but within your waste discharge requirements you have something that could pass muster. Okay, well, that's good enough. But now let's move on to the second part, because here's where it gets interesting. The regional board may not deny issuance of reclamation requirements. So here that word comes up again, tying back to another part of the code, to a project just because of salinity issues. And so that's where in some cities and in some situations, including possibly where this city ultimately may go, we may have to come back and visit this. But right now, a person reads this and this and say, well, doggone it, let's get them off our back. Let's pretend this is an Einsteinian thought experiment. Joe and Willie decide they're going to have the maritime algae aquaculture just west of town. They're going to be doing reclamation, and so they might have literally seawater up there, 30,000 milligrams per liter. You can't even drink it. And if we just took a little interpretation of this, they're over there growing seawater. Next thing you know, that even because we evapotranspired will be concentrated, remember I've talked about that last couple of times, it's even worse going down the groundwater, and now it's heading right over to our water wells. Well, maybe under the law, Joe and Willie got a right to be putting that kind of seawater in the groundwater, and so we'd be left with taking civil action. Hey, wait a minute. We've been damaged. And so, at the wastewater plant, we're kind of doing, not so flagrantly, but we're kind of doing the same thing. The water quality objective, we've talked about that before, is 700 microsiemens per centimeter, maybe as high as 900. Background conditions are sitting between 2,000 and 3,000. We don't know for sure. The data we have, it's in that range. But the highest well that's most impacted by our operation is sitting at over 9,000. So again, if we wouldn't want Joe and Willie over there on the west side, if we believe in stewardship and doing unto our others as we'd have done to ourselves, we really probably wouldn't want to be blasting 9,000 water into the San Joaquin, down to the Delta where salt's an issue, etc. And so we could push it, but then as a responsible public entity, looking at stewardship, long-term issues, it isn't good for Joe and Willie's seaweed works, west side. It really isn't good for us. So that's where when we come down to the last little click down, doggone it, these machines never work right. If we took a literal interpretation, there literally is no limit on how much salt we or anybody else could pound into the groundwater, and ultimately the groundwater is the drought-proof, relatively drought-proof, stable water resource of the area. So it's one of those things, maybe we could push the envelope, maybe we could go there, but it doesn't really pass the long-term stewardship standards. So again, I'm going to wrap this up and get back on to the progress we've made, because Often I'd be screaming and shouting about this, but in this case, I don't think as a people we want to go there at this point in that time, and that would be my professional recommendation at this time. So the next thing was, you've heard me talking about this as well. Oh, reclamation, doggone it, that evaporates all the water, leaves all the salt behind. This is no good. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. And Ernie and Lance had said, well, yeah, but out at our particular site, you can't get any more water in the ground. Well, I believe them, but again, you didn't hire me to be a yes man. So we did our own work with the state, with the various districts in the area, and the answer is yeah, Lance and Ernie knew exactly what they were talking about. And if we go on to the next slide here, you'll remember with reclamation, Lance is putting between 3 and 4 feet. This is kind of a number. Grown alfalfa, a couple of feet's going up. He's putting on as much water as he can. He's got about a foot going down into the ground, and at that, that's all he can get in. At that site, it's hydraulically subsurface, horizontally, again, ultimately getting over to the river limited. So in this particular situation, which is contrary to a heck of a lot of other projects I've done, seeing Dixon or Brentwood or, good grief, Escalon, Ripon, I can't even hardly think of them all, we would normally go over here and we'd have a lot bigger number. But we're limited to this. And since we only are going to evaporate about 20% with our infiltration concept, you add it up and Lance is getting rid of about 3.3 feet of water per acre per year. And if we went over to here, we're only at 1/6. And so as the asterisk says, yeah, we could go there, but we would double the land area we would need just for the existing flows. And instead of growing a crop, we would have something that it would kind of look like almost like a mud flat out there. Lance told me, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. Now, just in case, Ernie over here, he's thinking, well, for any of you clever, really sharp legal beagles, you might think, wait a minute, the Carollo salinity report said that those ponds were getting rid of 1.2 to 3.5 feet per year. So, no, hey, Rich, you got that number too low. This was out of finite ponds, and so the real issue is the ultimate perimeter. So these are small enough that the water, they can get locally a higher rate, get it out going down. But if you tried to convert those numbers into something covering 200 or 300 acres, it's not going to work. So just in case anybody, wait a minute, I've seen some bigger numbers. Yeah, those bigger numbers were something small and finite. So let's not go there. This is the observation of your staff, and in looking at all the district and state data, I'd say, yeah, that's about right. So here we are in a situation that what has been a magic bullet for other communities ain't going to work. We can go there, but we're going to get a lot more land just to get rid of water from the existing people. So moving on, something that had come up, okay, can we get into the river? Not with our water supply. And probably for the existing residents, probably not never. And the simple reason is that we got a salt problem already, and if we go over in the river, we don't get any background. We get 700, and that's it. So here, if we could get into the river, and then we'd have a whole burden of CTR, disinfection byproducts, a whole host of, another 200 contaminants of concern, we'd be getting salt down and putting a mighty big monkey on our back to boot. So that doesn't make sense. If we could get the salinity down till we get in the river, we can stay on land, and Lance can continue to do reclamation, which is what he wants to do. He doesn't want to go that infiltration thing. It just aesthetically and professionally doesn't make sense. So the answer is no. Okay, now so far I'd be sitting there thinking, yeah, are we going to have any good news around here? The answer is yes. As I'd commented before, we've looked at all of the recent Delta-Mendota Canal data. Historically, of course, the water in the canal was of a little poorer quality than it has been recently, but with the Delta Barriers Project, even after the back-to-back dry years on both the Sacramento and San Joaquin River watersheds, because, of course, the DMC and the aqueduct, it's a combination of both watersheds. So even after back-to-back years, the water in the aqueduct at Newman was averaging about 500 microsiemens per centimeter. Well under the 700, well under the 900, way well under the 1700 that we're currently drinking today. And on top of that, Chris White, the general manager over there, he can't speak for the board, but he's saying, no, I think we can probably conserve Newman. We're serving Santanella. It's Preston. this is something you want to do, let's sit down and talk about it. So that's looking pretty good, and that's a big enough option. I've got a picture here. North's up. There's the DMC. I know it's wiggled, but I just, schematically. So what are we talking about here? And I put it right up there on top. $20 million, and the way that works, got a diversion structure over there. Yeah, maybe we can get into something with CC idea. Maybe not. Rather than giving you a little number and then you get into it, it keeps growing. So my guess is you've had engineers that it starts with a little number. Before you're done, you're wondering where you've gone and you've bled and I don't know. So I'm starting high and hopefully we can trim down.
What was that salinity number again on the DMC?
500. And as I say, we looked at it in at the end of back-to-back drought years, sitting at 500. If we had a more typical year, it was sitting in the high 400s. So it's not the old bad water it used to be. With the barriers project up there, it's not quite as good as California aqueduct water because it has tide gates. But with the barriers, that's almost like tide gates. So it's good news. So we got, again, that diversion structure. These are total costs. This is not just construction. This is the whole schmoo. And we're going to talk about that again because someone talks about, well, the construction cost will be this. The next thing you know, somebody's into your pockets about another 30 or 40%. Where'd that come from? Total capital cost. Diversion structure over there. Pipeline getting it over to town. About $5 million. Got a water plant in there. About $13 million. So roughly, add it all up, basically we're talking about a total capital cost outlay of $20 million. That even includes 12% to secure those revenue bonds. And as a consequence, we end up having 500 microsiemens per centimeter water coming into the city for use rather than the 1,700. And therefore you get a direct reduction going out to the wastewater plant. So instead of it being 1,700 going up to 2,800, and then we got to face all the grief out at the wastewater plant, we're at 500 and go up to 1,500. And I commented a little asterisk there, and that's if you don't even touch the sewer use ordinances. And the regional board is saying, and we're going to get to this, but could we do a little something about the sewer use ordinances? I mean, there's some people might be putting a little too much salt in town to keep things fair and equitable. There's two other things on this I'm going to touch on again later, so I'm going to introduce them now, and we'll see them again. One of the options would be, let's just say we stay with this number. That might be just a smidge high, but at this point we're wheeling and dealing with the regional board, trying to find an equitable interpretation of the water code rather than something that is clearly we are not doing to our down gradient neighbors what we would like done to us if Joe and Willie were growing seaweed up over the town. So we would be wheeling and dealing about that, but let's say we're a little bit over. Once we got DMC water way over here, that's the lowest diluting water we could ever get to take it out to the plant to blend the two. So again, lands could stay with reclamation. If we add more water, it has to be a bit bigger, but we're staying with reclamation, with return on the crop, exactly what the regional board would want us to do, and is good stewardship. And the regional board is in line with this notion of dilution. So, little side option right over there. Now, I think everybody's, that's not in your scope of work. What's that doing down there? And I want to just touch on that. When the city built this plant over here, that was in the context of what was known at the time, what was good engineering practice. There is no fault with the city, consultants of record, etc. But if we were sitting here today and we were going to be master planning the city of Newman, put it right there, we would not today be putting the wastewater plant there. Shallow groundwater. The land was less expensive, and it kind of had gravity flow out there. In the old days, a pump station, a city made or break based on a pump station. So, it got gravity flow out to here, and the land was cheap. The way wastewater regulation has gone, a pump station and land cost, within reason, those aren't drivers. And so if we were just sitting here today, redoing the whole city from scratch, we would probably be on a little better soil, definitely with better drainage and better depth to groundwater. And so as we look to the future of the city, the existing residents, again, through no fault, sitting anywhere, we have made a major investment out here. We simply cannot walk away from that. But as we look to the 21st century, moving into it, there is no reason to perpetuate a precedent that is not, in my opinion, a maximum desirability of the city. So we may end up having New Growth's wastewater treatment plant, the actual treatment device out there, and the pipeline might go over here. The best soils are down off to the southwest. And of course, they're also more valuable for growing crops down there. So the land is going to be more pricey. But again, land costs versus overall long-term planning issues, this is something that the city should consider. It's not in our scope, but it was as we're looking at the soils maps and literally sweating blood over this thing, oh my goodness, we wish the plant wasn't here. Well, then the next question, well, where would you put it? Well, somewhere over in here. No parcel in general, but that's something we should be thinking about. So again, I'm going to leave that. We're going to come back to some of those things, but that's one last little point. If in fact there is a new plant and a new site, the geometry is not really material for New Growth. As we as a city, as we go forward, the nexus is very clear about what expenditures were related to making existing residents whole and no subtle or otherwise hidden impacts from development versus development. So it amongst other things, it makes, as we go through the process of nexus on funding, it makes that a lot clearer as well. And that in and of itself has value. But I'm looking at mostly from just a pure technical perspective. I just bring that up for consideration. So moving back on to, one last thing, because you're thinking, good grief, $20 million, where's it come from? And there's another point, yes?
A question, go back to the previous slide. Will you touch on the water treatment plant later on in your presentation? Or
In
you want to
detail?
cover it now? Just more or less, what does the plant cover? Will that be city water for the city that will be drinkable, water for the city simply for new development?
No, our scope is to try and avoid, because if we start saying, well, how much development might we have? I've commented before, the more development that participates, the more economy of scale for existing residents. The more development, we end up having that economy of scale, existing residents' costs go down. And so that ends up being that uncontrollable slide where our intent is, let's find the best project for the existing residents, and then once we know how that sets in, we can work with new folks. This is a 2.5 million gallon per day water production plant with a storage tank using conventional technology in concert with the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's comparable to other facilities using aqueduct or DMC water. And so that's what we've got here. This is sized for, I would comment just in passing, because when you look at the detailed report, because you actually don't break into the DMC cavalierly. That thing and that thing, the pipeline, are sized for a doubling of the city. In essence, going to roughly 20,000 people. Here, we're going to modularize that. But when you look at the detailed estimate, that and that, we oversize because you only do those once in a lifetime. Down over here, yeah, you get a site that's big enough, but these costs right here, existing people and businesses.
But will that be drinking water?
Yes, that is drinking water.
Will we take our wells offline?
No, you virtually will not use them, but for crying out loud, if I had, you've already made the investment in them, and so if I had terrorists of any ilk or otherwise, somebody poisons the DMC or otherwise, before we have the city running out of water, I think Ernie and the crew, unless, I'm just making a recommendation, we might not keep all 4 of them ready to go, but maybe 2 of them at any time. We have any problem, the pressures get low in the middle of summer for any reason, big fire flows. This is going to be the city's water supply. It's only if something is either wrong with this or in the distribution system, that the pressures get extraordinarily low, then the pumps would fire up. That is what this, some cities, this is their sole lifeline. Where you've already made the investment, my recommendation would be maybe we mothball 2, where, yeah, they're over there. We didn't legally destroy them, but at least 2 of them, I think Ernie and the crew, we exercise them, we keep them ready to go if we need them.
The DMC was at 500
Microsiemens per centimeter.
microsiemens per centimeter. What was the CCID reading?
The CCID?
Yes.
Oh, well, CCID, they said we have DMC water So we looked at the actual bulk DMC, since they can't say, well, this is our water and that's their water. So we looked at DMC, the state's data for the DMC, and that's sitting, as they say, 400 to a little over 500 in on an average annual basis. The worst time of all, if you'd say surprisingly, was in December. We actually got up to like 613 for just that 1 month, and that's because this does ultimately go back up into the delta, and in winter is when the farmers leach their fields of salt.
The point that I'm looking towards is instead of going up to DMC to take that water out, if we take it out of the CCID, we're considerably closer. We have less of an impact as far as the diversion structure. Our pipeline's closer.
That is an excellent idea. That again, in talking with CCID, they gave us no clue. They were talking about DMC. So that would, I think, and even the people, we actually had this done at, in essence, a type of a design level. Some of the things you're subsequently going to see are not at this level of detail because there's no way to make them at this level of detail. And so I had said, you know, I kind of think that we're probably a little high here. And as Fred's my water expert, said, until I know the others in the bag, I'd better stay on the high side. The cost can come down, but if the city makes planning on a lower number and then, oh, something blows up, again, you get back into that situation where you keep talking and the cost with your consultant keeps getting higher and you're wondering why they even prepared an estimate in the first place. It just seemed like it was a bit like a shoehorn. It was just kind of getting in there and then growing into the shoe after the fact. So yeah, I think that, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. And that's why I quizzed them. I said, I think we could get that for less. And their response was, Chris couldn't commit to that, so let's not assume it. But again, if we go there, we'd be looking to get those costs down. Okay, so again, we're gonna come around to this a little bit later, some of the principles. So don't have to look at the big picture. There's total capital cost, just in round numbers, when we actually see all the bits and pieces, $20 million. Yeah, 19.8, that's $20 million. And then right up in here, this is the big chunky stuff. Yeah, there's a treatment plant, the big bits and pieces in a pipeline, and you say, wait a minute, these are different numbers. Now, the bottom line, the important point is here, is one, this isn't just some curve thing. This is very specific to your situation. And if you look at these basic components, by the time you're done with CEQA, legal, engineers, administration, blah, 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 double it. Because I'm going to come back to that again, because you're going to say, wait a minute, how'd you double that? Well, this is just an example. You can kind of study it at your leisure. Yeah, basic components, rough estimate, double it to get total capital cost. Now, there's another important point down here. That's down here. We got the annual cost, the whole schmoo, and I can see this. Obviously, my machine doesn't talk to your machine so good. But the important point right over here is, if we went this way with the $20 million project, including doing it by revenue bonds, so we're taking a 12% in essence points hit right there before we get the 6% interest rate. That was our, Michael, you on board with that? But I keep thinking you're Lance, but you're not. But that's what our financial guy says. And so we do the whole thing. There's the water from CCID. There's the cost to run that plant. Now Ernie would say, yeah, and you should subtract something off over there because now I'm only maintaining the wells. I'm not operating them. That's a detail. Again, I'm overestimating. Bottom line, you get through it. We've got over here on the water side, we've got about 4,200 equivalent dwelling units. Probably 2,800 actual residences, and then the rest of them are in commercial and industrial. Okay, so, but we distribute it equitably over the equivalent dwelling units. Net effect is, and because we're doing a lot of this for the water plant, and so how we bill it, that's going to be an internal decision with you all. But the bottom line is, we're talking about adding either all to the water bill, all to the wastewater bill, or splitting it somehow in between. But we're adding about $50 a month. I mean, that's serious money. You know, if someone just said, oh, well, would you make a guess on how you'd split that? Well, the people are drinking the water and they're not dying, so I'd probably maybe put 15 on the water bill, because they are definitely getting an improvement. As I said before, going with the DMC, that's that twofer. You get two benefits for the price of one. So maybe 15 bucks on water, and 35 goes on to the wastewater, which puts us as a city up around $60 a month for sewer. That's a lot of money. That's over what USDA says is a quote, reasonable value for the working poor. They put that number at about $30 a month. And so again, at Calaveras County Water District, they've come to this number just on the wastewater side, and so they've developed what they call their RAP program, the Waste Rate Assistance Program. So in other words, they have a lifeline rate. And that means, yeah, the middle class and on up, they're going to be paying a smidge more. But again, people, even more than using power or the telephone, people have to be able to use the toilet. Otherwise, the next thing you know, they're going in the backyard because they had no choice, and then the flies are going over to your house and making you sick. So this is a public sanitation issue. It's something, if this is where we go, again, I would be recommending to the council they considering establishing a lifeline rate so that we do not have a disproportionate financial impact on the working poor and on, I'll say, lower income, fixed income people. We've had some fixed income folks that are taking home $10,000, $15,000 a month on their, quote, fixed income, and giving them the rate. That ain't right. Fixed income, but ooh, that was a lot of cash.
And how do we subsidize that?
You'd actually have a higher rate on everyone that can afford to pay more. So you'd be trying to make something equitable, and again, working with your public. Because in general, most people would say, yeah, I'll help my neighbor. If I know there's a real impact, I'll help my neighbor. Okay, so moving right along, I'm taking way too long. At least we got down to the bottom here. And the wastewater characteristics are atypical. This was quite a surprise to me. Coming in, I didn't know that, and this has more or less sent me almost to the psychiatrist more than once. So if we roll on over here, Newman wastewater, that's typical. Yeah, BOD about 250, salinity, water supply. Now we're at 1,700, so we're starting off with 3 strikes against us with 2 outs, and it's past the 9th inning. We already got a problem, but it's water. In our case, 1,700 plus 500. That's typical. Newman, where are we? Well, we're sitting up there at about 1,200 milligrams per liter, and the water is supply plus 1,100 microsiemens per centimeter. Yeah, what's the story here? And of course, the question right down there when we click the button: who is responsible? Because again, we're atypical. I've been to a lot of towns, and generally speaking, people, the residents, they're probably doing about the same thing, flushing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's who's responsible? We got to look into that. Okay, we're gonna work in terms of these equivalent dwelling units that I said before, because that's kind of what makes sense. So first, we're going to look at the flows, and this is out of the Corolla reports, and that's a little exasperating after all the effort we put in it. That's the industrial. That's supposed to say industrial. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, I can see the machine gets confused. It doesn't talk well here. On the residential, commercial, and II component, Corolla put the flow at 0.97 million gallons per day. A typical flow per equivalent gallon unit is about 280. Now, if we were up in San Joaquin County, they'd be saying 250. If we were over in Lathrop, they'd be at 288. This 280, it's a credible number. Let's not quibble about 3rd and 4th place actually. This is big picture. Okay, so on the residential, commercial, I side, we got about a total. That doesn't work. That's supposed to be 3,000. That's 3,460 now. And so what we got about 2,800 residential. I mean, these are single-family dwellings, units in multiple family dwelling, etc. And then we got about 760 commercial on a flow basis units. We do the industrial down here. Here's the flow, because they're still equivalent dwelling units. 280. Yeah, they got about 960 total. On the wastewater side, about 4,400. Over on the water side, we thought it was about 4,200. They don't have to mesh. Water and wastewater are different, but it's in the same ballpark. A person say, okay, yeah, that looks credible. I think Ernie and I talked about it. We kind of think that number is probably more like about 2,800. And so, okay, so maybe we need to have that number a little smaller, more like San Joaquin County. But again, that 27, 2,800, that's the same number for what we're talking about here. So now let's take a look at the BOD. Okay, the Corolla report, and that's what you find if you want to go look it up. They're putting the residential, commercial, and II, they're putting that at 7,300 pounds. Industries at 4,000 pounds. A typical equivalent dwelling unit, in other words, it got the model family with 3.1 people in it. I'm not sure how that tenth of a person, what that looks like in the house, but about 3.1 people per house. There's their flow. Now we got to break it on up. There's the flow. We know from up here, residential is about 2,700. If we look at the existing data, we're saying somehow, not the industry, but commercial, is sitting there with about 9,000 dwelling units on a BOD basis. Industry's down here sitting at about 6,000. Add it all up. We only got 4,400, something like that, EDUs flow basis. We got 18,000 on an organic load basis. And it's, wait a minute. Okay, so the next question down here is it atypical? Yeah, that's atypical. And that means that, because I would hope to have been able to get you some pretty good estimates on treatment costs, this isn't no standard stinking plant. So I can't just tell you that. I'm going to show you an equation, and we're going to assign responsibility at the preliminary level. Okay, next question is, are the data accurate? And again, as I mentioned earlier, in West Sacramento, Brentwood, a few other places, we actually had, as an example, the sampling tube was a little too close to the bottom of the channel. And of course, that's where all the solids are going down there. So the pipes down there just sucking a little too much off the bottom. And so the city may not have a problem. The data we have today said there's a problem. So before we go off and go off headhunting in the commercial community, we got to make sure we got our ducks in a row.
Well, let's touch on that just for a minute. We did do that. We went off into the commercial industrial community, and we were searching for these BODs, and we followed some of Carrillo's suggestions, and we spent some money. I can't recall the exact tune, but we did try to find, and virtually we came up with, we still don't know where it's coming from. And so, you know, that sucking off the bottom sound that you made, I'm kind of wondering, you know, where do we really search to resolve that? Because it's overly high for what we have in the numbers.
I agree. I mean, if someone said, I know what people do. I work in a lot of towns. People are basically the same. And if we take these numbers at face value, just say, no, those are good. We got restaurants wholly and controlly out of control, blowing everything down the sink. And that might be, but I kind of think you've got them, at least you've talked with them. So, you know, Ernie, talk to the restaurants? So I'm just saying, I was charged with reviewing the data.
Yes.
Data don't look so good to me. Hey, I mean, if they're real, we got some talking to do with some people. If they're not real, we got to identify that. We just got to, and other folks have done things. I'm just saying, when I look at it, I'm not convinced.
Okay.
So, and then we got to talk about financial responsibility. I mean, it may well be, no, that's real. And if that's real, then let's see who's paying what for what. So moving right along, there is no stand. I mean, there's no way I can just say, oh my goodness, this is such exotic wastewater. Here's the cost of treatment. And Carollo actually didn't attempt to do that either. You almost have to design this one before you can begin to know where you're going. But I'm not even going to call it a rule of thumb. Let's just call it a Rich Stoll guess, and maybe it's stuck on the wall a little bit kind of a thing. When you look at a wastewater treatment plant cost, roughly about a third is related to the hydraulics. In our case, that's that 1.2 million gallons per day. About a third is related to BOD load, and about a third is related to solids handling. Once you even reduce the BOD, you produce solids, you have to handle all that stuff. And solids handling is one of the uglier, more expensive parts of a wastewater plant. So as I said, we got 1.2 MGD of capacity, hydraulic, we know that. If we say, yeah, we're going to take those data as they are, that means that those 18,000 EDUs, that's equivalent to about a 5.1 MGD wastewater plant from a BOD and solids loading perspective. If you apply the equation, boop, 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 boop. Best guess, well, that got ahead of me. That got ahead of me. So 3.18, and of that, we know that the residential responsibility is sitting at 0.8 million gallons per day. We know that from looking at the data. We know that from the population. They're responsible for about 20%. If we got to go do something on treatment, and that sits commercial and industrial responsibility sitting at roughly 80%. Now, we just roll on to the next one here. Okay, so we're talking treatment, and that means we're not talking about disposal yet. We're talking about those ponds out there. If we got to replace those ponds because we got a salinity problem, and that we more or less, we know we got that one. Okay, nitrogen and pathogens, regional board saying, you know, you owe us proof. Now, when we look at EPA's data and my own experience, my guess is we're probably going to be okay on that. So it's, yeah, we got to get data. It's our responsibility to prove we're clean here. But my guess is we're probably going to be clean there. Now, down here on our organics, that's a little different. The regional board, they're thinking, they're just saying, we bet they got problems. And I'm saying, I've seen some with, some without. That one, I know that one. I think no on that one. That's a maybe. We got to get the data. But if we've got to replace those treatment ponds, and we already talked, there's a 20-80% responsibility on this thing. And again, I'm calling it a guesstimate because you already saw how flaky that equation was because you got this weird water. I can't design a plant for that without doing a lot of thinking about it. Above ground, that's not, there's a little star there. I give up. Okay, above ground lined aerated ponds, it ain't getting any cheaper than that. $18 million, and we haven't touched the salt problem. I'm going to call it a stripped activated sludge process. I mean, we're talking, I can't get it any skinnier than this. And this number here, 25 million, that's based on an actual, and not for me, another engineer working with the city of Lathrop. So it's not like, oh, that's a phony number. That was a real number for a real design build. Down here, tertiary activated sludge with an MBR. This is the one, if you knew you were going to be going RO, because we've talked about RO, and we're going to talk about it still tonight. 59 million, and we haven't even got to the RO. So when we talk about the numbers that, it's my understanding from Kroll, I mean, it's not like they were out to lunch, but they were taking these kinds of approaches. This is one approach of many. Okay, so when you look at that kind of money, and this is on treatment, we haven't even talked about the salt, clearly there are incentives, and we got to make sure that the characterization is correct. I mean, I'm not convinced, and we're talking about a huge amount of money, and we're literally threatening businesses, in essence, when we're talking about 80% of 20, 30, 40 million dollars. And is there some way in working with them, if they say, okay, we can see that, yeah, we got some responsibilities there, we may be able to take care of that more cost effectively other ways. Okay, let's work with them. I mean, we want business. That's employment. And obviously, when we're talking about this, it's worth the effort to try and keep those ponds in service. The ponds, for what Ernie and Lance need, they're working. The only problem is a bit of leakage. So, a lot of reasons, therefore, I want to make sure everything's right, but I'd like to keep the ponds in service. Okay, so I beat that to death. Now we're going to talk about disposal problems. Now, hydraulically, Lance is reporting he needs some little improvements. He needs a little more storage, he needs a little more land, and that wasn't in my scope. I mean, I think the city's completely, they know what they need, how they're going to do it. So, hydraulically, we're looking okay. Salt-wise, looks like we got a problem. So, let's just, I know I'm belaboring this, but I want to make sure we're all together on this as we move forward. Here we got the city's water supply coming in at 1,700 microsiemens per centimeter. So here we are, coming into the city. I have no idea how these machines work. That's supposed to be up there, obviously. But as it leaves town, it's about 2,800. So we had that about 1,100 microsiemen per centimeter increase. Atypical, but there it is. Now we go over to our treatment ponds and our storage reservoirs. We got some evaporation going on there. And so by the time we're done, we're leaving at about 3,500. Just going across the process there. And we had some leakage, about 3,200. That'd be an average just going on down out of those ponds. Okay, then we're going to take that 3,500 over to the alfalfa. We got a lot of evapotranspiration going over there. We got a crop coming off, but by the time the water's going on down, I think that's probably a low estimate, but by the time we're all done, we're at 7,000. As I said, if you look at the 2004 data, the well that is most central to the reclamation area, sitting at 9,500. So again, we are the equivalent of Joe and Willie's Sealy Works for somebody downstream. Okay, so there, the shallow groundwork, the last thing that comes up, yeah, it's sitting somewhere between 2,000, that's 3,600. It's in that range because, again, we don't know. The data you have, you can't tell. Want to get that because, again, there's a lot of swing in there on how we finally, if we have to, argue points of law. We want to nail down that number. Okay, so again, need to define the background salinity from a regulatory perspective. There is no one number. I mean, that's a key point. Someone says, doggone it, can't you guys get the background down? If we looked at the background on the north side, the south side, the east side, and the west side, they'd all be different. And in the final report, we're providing probably the most definitive study of this at Mountain House, which is also an irrigated agriculture area with shallow groundwater and somewhat drainage impacted soils. When you look at those data, you're going to be saying, okay, I understand the nature of the problem. Let's get the data we need. Let's go negotiate with the regional board. Let's not let them take a one number attitude. We want a responsible, centroid type central number, including credit for the grading. It goes across our property, and the groundwater quality deteriorates. On property to the north and to the south, if it goes across, it also deteriorates. We want equal treatment with other land uses in the area, not just, oh, you're different, so you get things for the whole shmoo. So again, that's what we're talking about there. Okay, it's hard to read here. The council's got the book. This is again where this little part over here, whether we go from the 3,500 to the 7,000 plus, hasn't been quantified. I'm recommending that you retain an agronomist. I'm not one to try and get a better handle on that. And then the last part down here is we want to see if there are any effluent salt soil reactions. At Lathrop, California, the agronomists are estimating that of the salt we apply, about a third of it gets sequestered in the soil. So, so by the time it goes down, we've lost a third. And of course, if the guy's first, well, wait a minute, that's not sustainable. I mean, is it leaking out in winter? What are we doing? Well, actually, we're creating sort of a caliche or hardpan layer out there. And oh goodness, that's going to kill the soil. It's going to seize up on us. No, just make sure you occasionally rip it and disc it, so you can break it up. But we had that problem at Woodbridge. We've had that problem another place. I mean, a bit of a surprise, but yeah, we actually, as it went on down, we started losing salt, and yeah, there's a way to control that just with ripping and disking. But in an earlier time, we didn't know until the whole thing plugged up, and then we blew it up and found out we had concrete down there, more or less. Okay, so moving right along. Again, who's responsible? The big issues. Again, from the Corolla reports, here's the Phase 2 salt study. It said the water supply was 1,700 coming to the wastewater plant. Bear with me on this. About 2,700, and they made a split at that time. About 3,200 from industry and non-industrial sites, about 2,000, which meant the community was doing the 1,700 plus 300. Now, I myself, I've worked with a lot of towns on groundwater, and that looked too low to me. I mean, there's too many water softeners in town. So I was a little suspicious of that result, but that was in the salt study, so I was suspicious. They, in their TM2 Appendix B, you got to kind of go way in the back. There, we're at 1,700, about 2,600 at the wastewater plant. Again, same number from industry, guesstimating the non-estimate about 2,500. There, we're plus 800. That looks like a more credible number. So, I mean, I thought, okay, I kind of like this one a little better than that one. But again, we should want to sort those things out before we start making, as it were, polite accusations. So if we start trying to assess responsibility, the key concept is excess salt. Somebody can have a whole bunch of salt, but they bring a lot of water with it. That's okay. I mean, there's tons and tons of salt coming down the Sacramento River every day, but there's so much water, the salinity is low. So we have to look at the excess salt. And so if the regional board, from their perspective, they're saying, well, anything over background plus 500, that's the 2,200, that's excess. So we're taking the difference between this and what the regional board would say, that's okay, and multiplying by the flow and coming up with a excess salt unit. It's unitless, but a number against a number, and it says, well, yeah, it looks like the responsibility is about 50-50. Now, we want to look into that. That just happens to be more or less the same number you had in your Corolla report, about 50-50. So, we're completely independent approaches coming to about the same number as we move forward. But still, we're talking about a big responsibility from the non-residential side. Okay, so options for reducing salt. Obviously, we could talk about limiting the commercial industrial salinity to residential levels. That's something you will consider as you move forward. We could also convert over to the DMC water supply. I've already talked about that. Yeah, great way to get the salt down. We could add desalinization at the wells. That's something that wasn't in the original scope, but the council said, we're going to go to the public on this. We've got to talk about that. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. And then and here I just comment in passing, if we do desalinization before it gets used, we're also having that very expensive water going on the lawns, the parks, and every place else. I mean, guys are washing their car with RO'd water. So if we put the the desalinization out at the wastewater plant, we're only desalting what we got to desalt to make things right. But of course, there, people got some benefit on a better water supply. Here, they just are able to rest easier at night knowing they aren't Joe and Willie's Seaweed Works west of town. Okay, and then the last thing, yeah, we could dilute the wastewater salinity by adding more water and then expanding the area to compensate for that added water. And then we talked about that on the DNC chart. So, moving right along, adding desalinization, I'm guessing we have to be pretty reliable, so we've got it on 2 wells, and I apologize for that unit, because I think everybody out there is, what on earth, did you get that from Mars? Well, no, this comes out of the Department of the Interior. The federal government's still trying to get us to go metric, so they torture engineers with this kind of stuff. In language we understand, that's about 1,500 gallons per minute, the size of your well. Or, for wastewater guys like me, about 2.1 million gallons a day. So yeah, the water supply is bigger than the wastewater supply, because not all the water supply ends up as sewage. You have a lot of water that's on the gardens, et cetera, et cetera. So base units, and this is, remember that doubling factor, we're talking about 2 units at about $5.2 million a pop. And you think, where'd you get that number? There it is. Okay, this is from the Department of the Interior, so in other words, this isn't me just doing screwy things. And this is where, again, we did the 8,000 number, so you get down there to 8,000. 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, about $5.2 million. And of course, that doesn't include everything, and this is in $2,000. And that would be talking about, when you follow the numbers here, where'd they go? Oh, here we are. We're not this one, brackish water RO or nanofiltration. So in the technical reports, we comment, you've got really 3 options. You've got brackish water RO, nanofiltration, or what's called electrodialysis reversed, EDR. So you've got some options, but you can see, for the intents and purposes here today, they're all about the same. So that's just where it comes from, so you're not thinking, where'd you get that number? Moving on to the next bit of the piece. Okay, that was in 2000. We got to talk about building this sucker out in 2006 or 2007. 30% for inflation. With the 2 of them, we're now up at $14 million. Man, we're approaching that, got to double that to get the total capital cost, 28. We're already over the DMC, and yet we have higher our O&M costs with RO. And we still haven't even got rid of the brine. Got 2 options. Deep well injection. The reports we read, yeah, there's some marine sediments down there. But again, if you're going to be pumping water onto those marine sediments, how are you going to prove it isn't popping up someplace else? And unless you got oil, natural gas, or some other extraction off a saline formation, how in your CEQA document do you commit? Yeah, we're long term, we're not going to be pushing that up over a clay layer into somebody else's water supply. Gets a little tough. We go there, because you're going to see why I'm even talking about it. You say, well, sound like bad news. 2.5 million, 18 million. Oh yeah, I think we better talk about that some more. And I'm just going to comment. This is for only 1 unit, because you really are only going to be using 1 RO unit at a time. It's this one and then that one. You don't need 2 brine systems. 1 brine system can serve the 2 redundant RO units. So again, just for completeness, because again, right now I'd be in shell shock. Okay, here's the first one. Here's the injection wells. Yeah, we're about over there at 8,000. And these are not in the amount of water we're injecting, but the capacity of the plant going on over there. Yeah, there's that about 2.5 million in $2,000 base cost. Going on to the next one. And you say, how can it possibly be? Because these brine ponds are almost the equivalent of hazardous waste facilities. Not quite, almost. Yeah, they're pricey. Moving up the 8,000 line, coming on over. Oh yeah, it's $18 million for 1 of them. Best estimate from the Department of the Interior. And they're trying to push this stuff. So moving right along, so we add it all up, get it over to here, and grand total, 34 million, 74 million. Gee whiz, I like that 20 million back with the DMC, and we have lower O&M costs over time. Now, as an economy measure, I thought, I got to work this over. I mean, these numbers, I may as well get strung up in town. Okay, 1 RO unit could do it with the wells as backup. People are going to say, hey, Ernie, the water tastes funny today. You know, what's up? Why are the RO units down? If we stripped it out and only put in 1 unit, oh yeah, we got it all the way down. Right over here, we cut that down to 15 because now we have to pipeline connecting them. So it's not just 14. You've got to have a pipeline. And then over here, oh yeah, over there, we're at 21 for capital costs, and we've got a reliability problem, and we've got higher O&M costs. And so the answer is, this isn't the way to go. I think we can get that one off the slate. We would have to have some extraordinary information come up out of the data we need to come back here. So that's, I mean, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, adding desalinization out to the wastewater plant. Here we only desalt what we got to desalt. People in town, they're still drinking what they're drinking. They're not knowing nothing. So we got the 1.2 million gallons a day coming at 2,800. Because we have the salt and we know the ponds are leaking, we do the RO plant, this puppy's got to go. So we're right up into here, that 18 plus million, right? Stop right there. We don't do something about the water supply, new treatment plant right there, boom. Coming out of that, okay, now we're going to split about half the water off into a brackish water RO unit, because this isn't as good as groundwater. You have to have pre-treatment on there. It's about 7 million there, 4.5 million on injection. Again, we still have to do that CEQA document to even prove we can do it. Coming back all around, and you say, now, well, Rich, okay, so adding it up, let's see, call it 20. So for about 32 million at the wastewater plant, and I get the new treatment process, am I whole? There's a 1 hidden there, isn't that? It's amazing how the most critical thing. This just makes this exactly comparable to the DMC, because there's an infinite number of combinations and permutations, and that's what that board over there to the left shows. Even where we stand, it's complex when we look into the details. But what we're doing here, we're comparing apples to apples. And DMC's 20, this is 30-something. Again, I think unless something extraordinary comes up, we're not doing RO at the plant compared to the DMC. Okay, moving along, what do we still need to know, and what we don't have a definition of what constitutes background or the gradients. In other words, we have to do that to get our best deal with the regional board. Got to answer that question, can those ponds remain in service? If the answer is no, right off the bat, we just throw 20 million on the floor, and it's probably worse than that. Are the data accurate? That helps here, and also who's responsible for the financial implications. Okay, got to get into that. And once we find out that, and let our businesses know, I think they would want to say, we want to be a partner in that. We've got a major stake. Let us work with you on seeing what we can do. And again, trying with an agronomist, trying to find out exactly how much evapotranspiration is occurring. Again, we need the data to make our best arguments with the regional board. And again, if we do all these things and we're still shy by a smidge, that's where, again, you go back to the water code and say, no, we are not Joe and Willie's Marine Works wrecking somebody's water supply. We're a responsible agency, and we still need some relief. So, okay, if I couldn't pick, I don't have that, well, anyway, no, if I pick the screen up, it's still down there. Okay, and then we have to find out whether we're having, like that Lathrop, losing a third of the salt in the soil. Wouldn't that be nice? And not in a way that we're going to wreck the soil. So, I am wrapping up, thank goodness. Recommended actions, because at the end, okay, what do we got to do, people? Yeah, we're working our brains out up in Rockland over this. Got to determine the sources of the BOD and the salinity, to a quantitative, factual level, and see if they can be reduced at the sources. We really need to talk about, out at the wastewater area, not in town in general, we've got to talk about the soil, groundwater movement, and agronomy. In other words, what the crops are doing, what the soil's doing with the effluent as it goes down. Are we losing some salt? Are we gaining some salt? Some areas we do. Got to understand that. To do that, we need more groundwater monitoring wells, and as I commented earlier, the regional board, on a completely independent attack, they came to the same conclusion, and since they're saying we need more data, that's equivalent to saying, and therefore you need more time to make your decision. So again, they seem to be sympathetic, understanding the complexity of the situation, trying to find out whether we're polluting from the ponds, because again, that has that multi-million dollar implication, and then trying to find out what the background groundwater quality is and the gradients. There is no one number. The city is it's the city's responsibility to put forth an a plausible, defensible definition of what is background, because there is no one number. So it's your responsibility to define that, how you're going to do it, and again, that's how you are going to get the best deal for your people in this situation. Okay, got all that. Now we got to do that detailed salt and water balances. And you say, wait, isn't there just one? No, no. We got alternatives, and so you as a council, in concert with your staff, okay, now if we do this, we get to here. Now if we do that, we get to there. Okay, we want to work with the state on this. Hey, that one seems to miss by a bit, but we can make these arguments that background water quality is here. So does that constitute a, quote, good quality irrigation water? That's language they're now using in some of their hearings. And so we know that your water wells are about the best groundwater we're going to get in the area. So one possible argument would be, if we can get the water as it hits the crops to 1,700, short of somehow a farmer having access to one of the aqueducts, that's the best quality water that farmer can have. And therefore, the consequence to the groundwater is not you being Joe and Willie's seaweed works up over the city. That's you being, Lance being, a responsible farmer using a water resource that he didn't select it to find the worst. That is what is available to him. And that's a powerful argument, and that's where, again, you say, and are you back into the corner? If we can't go there, we want to start talking about the water code again. So, again, trying to find out what we got going on there. This is where, again, got all that going, trying to resolve with the regional board what background is, negotiating on the reclamation. Hey, we got this, we got that. You know, where can we go from here as a people? Once we got that, that's where you would be able to determine your most cost-effective alternative compliance strategy. In other words, there's still a lot of unknowns on the market. But again, I think we know where we're going. I'm going to try and get to that real quick. Submit that to the board for concept approval. I've already talked with them. If we go DMC, are you prepared to work with the city? The answer is yes. We will need time for further improvements. The answer is yes. So I'm of the opinion that Joanne and Bert they're being as forthright and as open as they can without them viewing us as the equivalent of Joe and Willie's Marine Works sitting up over the city. So I am pleased with their cooperativeness and their openness to looking at alternatives that are feasible. I mean, the sky and the moon aren't feasible, so feasible. Implement the strategy to the extent possible. We may not be able to go where we want to go all at once, and so again, that's where the regional board is talking about schedules. Ordinance revisions, I would be thinking we will be banning new installations of certain types of water softeners, and there is the possibility that rests, of course, obviously with council and working with your commercial and industry dischargers, talking about maybe some revisions there. And then it's possible, depending on where we stand, you might actually create a, in essence, an incentive program. Oh, you got one of the bad water softeners? Well, you know, you bought it all in good faith. You know, we don't want to damage you. We will help you replace it with the correct kind. You benefit, we benefit as a people, we benefit. So we might end up having an incentive program, and then again, public education so that people actually understand what this is all about, because we're certainly asking to get very deep into their pocket. If we're talking about getting into their pocket, they better know why we're doing it. Otherwise, this doesn't fly, as you well know. So, yeah, I'm wrapping. Best apparent project, what we know today, DNC water supply. We would be reducing the commercial industrial BOD limits, or working with them to see what we can do, but I think we need something there. If needed, once we got that, diluting water coming on over from the DMC, the diagram I showed earlier, and not in my scope of work, just as one of those things, in going down the path, it was, oh my goodness, yeah, I think that with new growth, we should be taking their funds into a new treatment plant on a new site. Again, if we were creating the town of Newman again, right now today, what we know today, we wouldn't be putting the plant where we plant. Let's not perpetuate, I'm not going to call it an error, let us not perpetuate the logic of the past on the future. Let's not box ourselves in. At least for me, an important point is that we still have some land resources out there. We also have this whole issue of how the water gets away. That's all very fragile, all very delicate. The existing people may still need, even with DMC water down the road, a bit more mitigation. Anything and everything at that site and related to that site, considering the issues, should be reserved to get the most cost-effective program for the existing people. That being the case, I don't want there being any competition for those remaining limited resources by new growth. It should be in a new place, new treatment plant, even though the plant might be on that site. My recommendation to you, existing site, reserved for existing people, including its perimeter.
Question to that point, Rich. You used the number of 20,000 at one point, and so was that infusing with the new growth funds, with the new?
20 million.
Pardon?
20 million.
I thought you used a population number at one
Oh,
point.
yeah, no, the water plant, we had up around 20,000 people. It's really like 18,000 something. It was the water guys did that, yeah.
Okay.
And so those people, now there's a possibility, if we do the DMC water, and that means therefore when new growth comes to town, they're hooking up to the DMC too, because we already
Right.
planned for that.
Right.
That water, possibly, it'd be a bit an uphill battle, but if we're looking at real estate to the southwest, and we get into a situation where we would be condemning property, we can't get on the open market. My experience in condemnation court, and I'll defer to counsel, I mean, the first thing his honor says is, did you have feasible alternatives? And well, we kind of had maybe a river thing that just get thrown out right there. New folk, new water supply, new plant, it may be pricey, but that may be able to go to the San Joaquin River. That's a very high standard. I don't think that's there for the existing people with this plant. They'd be spending that $60+ million. That's no good. We've made an investment. Let's make that whole. But new people, we would work with them as we look at this option here, whether it's land, as I said, my guess would be I'd be looking to the southwest, even though that's pricey, valuable land. We could still grow a crop, or going over to the river. Okay, long range, this in deference to the regional board, they're saying, really you think about replacing those ponds? I'm saying, what, you're going to give me 20 years? Because I got to pay off my DMC bond. I can't just kind of, if we have a run on inflation, maybe we can sneak one in. But the answer is, it's mighty tough. And I'll be long and hard arguing that if they aren't causing pollution, you've got no control over this matter. Politely back off. If they are causing some pollution, but it's not life-threatening, it's a factual statement. We were talking about this, and I said, well, I think the basin plan limits me to 10 years. And Joanne thought, you make these kinds of, we maybe can talk about longer. No, I'm not going to say, yeah, we can get more, because basin plan talks about 10 years. But these are the kinds of things, when you make these sorts of major improvements, you are, in their opinion, acting with the overall public trust, not only with your people, with the state of California. Again, that's really more important. Okay, I think that pretty well wraps it up, and this is the one I'm leaving it on. This is more or less, that's where it looks like. And in the back, I'm going to walk, I've got these up here. I'm going to carry this with me. Public can have a look at it. In the back of your binder, you've got two things. Now that looks a lot like that spaghetti we had, I'm going to keep it over here, before. These are the initial activities. Those are the things I'm talking about, where we don't have as good a data that I'd like to have to make a multi-million-dollar decision. So we're talking about monitoring wells, negotiating with the regional board, all those sorts of things over here. And then if we got to fiddle around with the ponds, I hope not, but that's up over there. And then here's the salinity part right down in here. And again, I'm just going to briefly go over it one more time, depending on what those salt and water balances show. The general alternatives are what we call revision. Option number 1 is ORD 1. That's where we're going to reduce the salinity and the BOD by revision of the sewer use ordinance. Modifying the wastewater treatment plant, we got WWTP 1, 2, and 3, where with 1, we're adding some sort of a low salinity water to achieve compliance. That would be like bringing over that DMC water above and beyond the water supply needs. With number 2, we would be converting the effluent fields, the effluent reclamation fields into infiltration basins, and therefore doubling or more the land area for existing people. I don't think we want to go there, but you can't just throw some of the babies out with the bathwater. You got to keep them in there a bit longer. And then finally adding ROED or nanofiltration out the wastewater plant. Again, I don't think we're going to go there, but we have to, you just can't, it's premature. On the water supply side, we could try and find some higher quality water wells, some wells with lower salinity. Everything I've looked at and the city's looked at in the past, yeah, we can maybe knock off a couple of hundred microsiemens per centimeter, but that's not going to get us where we need to go. We could add the ROED or nanofiltration to some of the wells. We looked at that cost. No, you better be back over with the DMC and then the water 3 is working with CCID on the DMC. So he said that's what it is down here in green. Different creatures. These things just don't appear to be feasible for existing residents. The first one is discharge the San Joaquin River. As I said, we'd have to get the salinity lower than we need for reclamation to get over there. And on top of that, we'd be burdening ourselves with about 200 more regulations. Exporting the effluent to a site overlying more saline, shallow groundwater. That's what Dixon's doing, working real good for them. Concepci's not in yet, but look, that's they're putting all their money there. We looked at all of the maps. That option doesn't exist for you. Any place that's got more saline water, it's because the groundwater is actually coming up and evaporating. And so no hydraulic capacity on those sites, so it's no good. We could talk about injecting the effluent into deep saline groundwater. Here we'd be talking about taking the whole flow, all 1+ MGD for now and forever. And maybe we should have that one actually up as WWTP4. You're going to need a heck of a secret document to get that one in. So anyway, just so we're all on the same page here, what's this other thing? Well, again, I can't tell you the specifics yet because we don't have good enough data. But just as council and as members of the public, you can say, well, what are we talking about here? Okay, if we're looking at trying to protect a 2,400 microsiemen per centimeter groundwater, that's the evidence best we are. Start down here at the groundwater because disposal governs all. And you can follow any old path back up you want to see the things we would have done to get there based on available data. By the time you have data, is this going to change? Yeah. But this way, people can think about, hey, you guys have looked at a lot. A box disappeared. I swear computers are not reliable. I'm shocked they're controlling nuclear weapons systems. I'm fearful. I got to pay up my insurance. Yeah, so anyway, this is so everyone can see the things and the paths as we keep going back up, finally, to the water supply. It's driven by disposal, working back up through the treatment plant, through regulation orders, back up through the water plant, back up to the water supply. That's what it's all about. It's just because I'd ask the question, so why aren't some of those things just so the council and the members of the public, when they read the whole report, we actually go through, you go from here to here to here to here. And then once you've seen a couple of examples, then you'd be comfortable navigating the whole thing yourself. So there's a little primer, and the primer is color-coded. So that's, is there something special about those? No, they're just only covered in the report so that you can go through it, and then once you got those down, you can navigate the whole thing probably better than I can. With that, I'm done. Probably too long. No.
Thank you very much. That was quite informative. A lot to soak in one setting, but I know there's questions from the audience.
I've got one first.
Go ahead.
Did we discount going with that DMC water directly to the wastewater treatment plant, bypassing the city and diluting out there?
Mike, the answer is no. If that's something you would like to look into, explain the whole thing, absolutely we can include that. Because we thought, good grief, once we got there, we've already invested quite a bit of public money and the water. In Mendota, California, we actually faced the same situation. The true story. And it was DHS got involved. And they said, let me get this straight. You bought some, they had to buy, you bought some low salinity water, adjudicated water rights, and you're sending them out to the wastewater plant, and you still have the people drinking that crap? Forget the regional board. You got problems with me. So I at Mendota, we've been there, attempted, done that. Literally, I'm so bad for a bruise back here. Got kicked out. DHS. Wait a minute. You got a marginal water supply. You're not taking that good stuff over there. So I think we can include it. But again, as I said, Mendota, California, it was no.
Any other questions from the council?
Oh.
No, at this time. Could we get the mic, Ernie? Could you want to make sure everybody can hear? Tim, you want to give Mr. Stoll your mic and grab this other one here so we can bounce short?
I'll tilt up. I'm okay. I used to be a professor, so I'm accustomed to shouting.
Jim Silvera, 1419 T Street. My question was, why weren't we just coming directly to the city with the DMC water? I didn't understand that the dilution at all. Were you saying if we wanted to dilute to go out there, or why would we even dilute?
Oh, that would just be, I mean, I think I talked loud enough. That would just be an option. The original drawing, and this isn't the scale, this is just a way we can see, yeah, we've got the water plant on the edge of town, but we're trying to find the best pipeline around, best site, probably really located over here. But the notion was, oh my goodness, once we got this kind of high quality water, it's better than anything we get, unless somehow CCID has some magic water rights on the San Joaquin River, where the state's fighting to get that water quality better. My goodness, we better at least show and consider that, yeah, we'll bring over 2.5 million gallons a day for people to drink, and we might bring over 500,000 gallons just to help out at the plant, depending on, again, where we go here with the regulations and where the dust settles with the regional board. You could use that water out here in an expanded area a lot cheaper than having a tiny RO plant out there, and so that's why we're showing it. This is primarily about bringing water over for town on the water supply, but holy cow, once we brought that water over to here, let's make sure we plan, if it's in the city's best interest, to break another small pipeline over the plant, which is actually how I do this one. I'd make sure that I got a sewer over to the wastewater plant, because we don't have to mix it on a moment-by-moment basis. We're going to get months of averaging time. So every night, when the sanitary sewer system isn't got much flow, over, not the treated water, it's going to come around. We're going to have the cheapest water we can get, it's going to dump into the sewer system. So in essence, every night, you're going to end up having this flush of very clean water going down to the plant to save the cost of a pipeline. So that's why that's dashed. My guess is, if we had to do that, if that was cost effective for the city, we'd have that little pipeline coming around the plant, so we're just going to put raw water in, drop it into the sewer, probably every night when the flows are low, get it out the plant that way. Save $1 million in piping every morning.
Even with this scenario, the DMC scenario, we still have to identify the abusers of the high content of salt going out there, or else this becomes not a very accurate picture either, right?
That is yes and no. I think the city, if the city doesn't go after commerce and industry, at the minimum, they have to pay their fair share of the surplus. And so again, that's where we find out if the salt study was correct, and the residents are only doing the plus 300, their share of excess salt went to zero. It's all then on industry and commercial sources. So again, that's where we got to touch out on some of those details. But if we get to here, this number is as if nothing happens. That's the 1,000, 1,100 increase currently going across the city. That number right there, by the time it hits the plant, because we're trying to save those existing ponds, that's like I said, that's 20, 30 million right out of the back. So let's try and keep those ponds. We've got a 20% increase. That's now 1,800 microsiemens per centimeter water as it hits the farm field. We would be arguing with the regional board, politely, but pointing out that area groundwater, not the worst, but area groundwater the farmer could use, not picking and choosing, is 1,700, 1,800. Let us be farmers. We've got it down to where we are background, regional irrigation water. Let the farmers be farmers. And if we simply, that's the point where, again, if I can't get a reasonable solution there, that's where I might be looking for legal guidance. When you go the full mile and people are still saying no, as if you're somehow different from your agriculturalists on either side of you, at least me, that isn't fair.
When you look at all the 4 different scenarios that you have proposed, especially last time you went into them in depth, this one and the RO within the city are the only ones where the actual residents would get a greater quality of water. Except the RO creates a large residue, am I right? We have to still get rid of the salinity, the salts.
Yes, the way that would look, if we went with R1 on one well, because we absolutely we don't have the money. So there's one well, one RO plant. This would all go away, and probably, Ernie, what well do you want to put that puppy on?
Probably the largest well, number 8.
Oh, the big 2,500 gallons a minute? Oh, I don't know, price might gone up a little bit. So we have that one unit in town and then there'd be this line pipeline going, if we can get a secret document to inject it, probably getting it out over some here by the wastewater, some over here, whoop, down about 3, 4, 5,000 feet into the marine sediment. So that would be one option. If we can't get the secret document, we're bringing it out of town, double line, this designated waste, almost hazardous waste ponds, and we spent $18 million. We're not going to do that. Obviously, at 18 plus the 7, we could explain to the people why we didn't do DMC.
So if you went to in the city here and RO'd all the wells to give the city cleaner drinking water, we would still have a large residue problem to get rid of, which is very expensive. And like you said, it's almost toxic. So the two options that give the city residents better quality water are this and an RO, which is extremely expensive. So if you went with this one, which apparently seems to be the cheapest, you had said about $50 increase average if we didn't scale it and variable it to the residents like some communities are doing. That does not go away as the town grows, because you said that future money would go into the second wastewater treatment plant. It wouldn't really change that $50 average per person on existing residents?
No.
Okay.
If somehow, if we had developed the thing, because again, I've already got that thing, well I did, my water guy. I'm nobody. I'm the water guys. No, you don't get into the DMC, but what you need first. That thing and that thing are already sized for doubling of the community. That thing isn't. And so that's already there. The city obviously would be liking to talk to the development community. You know, if you ever want in, we're building some things and we're running short of cash. It's now or never. On this, it's now or never. If you want to do the well thing, you're going to more than pay for that on your wastewater plant, even if you're going to site. You really ought to be in on this, and you have a more marketable property as well, because you've got better quality water. So that's where they would be working, I think, with the development community on that. With this alternative, the city basically would be saying, in concert with CCID, Newman is a surface water community. And so it wouldn't be, the city would not tolerate, well, I can't speak for council. My recommendation, they would not tolerate someone saying, no, I'm going to put in my own well. No, this community, because of wastewater reasons and water quality reasons, is a surface water town. You either come into this project, or you go to another community, or you stay on large enough blocks and have individual wells and systems, or talk with the county about forming a CSA and a rural residential development. That the city is a surface water city. You buy into your share of the project.
Very good presentation, and I guess bottom line is dollar for dollar, the residents get, if you got to sell it, this is the best one because they get improved water quality.
This, as I said all along, I don't like to bias my original thinking, but with this one there was clearly, as I say, a twofer. There are two benefits for the price of one, and curiously enough, the price to get the twofer was less than any other credible alternative standing on the page. And as I say, we have water quality work to do out here to get our best deal, to see exactly, hey, was that number good enough? Well, we got to work to get that number down more. Could it even be a smidge higher? Okay, there's a lot of details on that that are, as I say, they have the potential swing of even tens of millions of dollars, but none of them really overall impact the best apparent alternative. And as I say, to me it's fairly clear there would have to be something very radical found in the initial activities phase to change my opinion. And the worst would be that the ponds are leaking pathogens. If we find that the existing unlined ponds are leaking virus and therefore the potential for pathogens, I might shift over to the RO at the wastewater plant because we'd already be spending that 18 plus million to replace the ponds. So that would be the worst new. But EPA looked into the matter. We've looked into the matter on other sites. And you don't do, just so we're all on the same page on this, I mean, I don't want to belabor this, but you don't test for the normal indicators of coliform that the state and the regional board, they're saying, well, you look for coliform, that's the indicator. The coliform are not going to be found. If we find coliform in the monitoring wells, that's because the monitoring well wasn't built correctly or disinfected correctly. Bacteria are too large to migrate in these soils. We're going to be looking for the virus of coliform. If the virus of coliform bacteria are there, It means that the virus of people could get there if there was a major epidemic in the country or in the city. And so we'll actually be looking for real virus, but human virus in a normal situation are so rare. You're looking for a needle in a haystack, and then we'd be squinting, we didn't find any, and then everybody gets sick and wondering, gee whiz, you guys weren't very good engineers.
Let's just not talk about chicken flu.
Oh, no, it's good point, yeah, chicken flu. So as I said, anyway.
Avian flu, chicken flu.
Yeah, so as I say, that's what we'd be looking at. We'd be looking at actual virus in the water.
Thank you.
More questions?
Rich, now that you're bringing in water from the canal, which is higher quality water, wouldn't that relieve the need for so many water softeners in town?
Yes.
And that way you would drop your...
We would hope that with the public education program and the explanation, it's, folks, if you keep buying those sacks of rock salt over the grocery store, pay once and pay me twice. And if this one back over here isn't pretty. So I would like to think we could do that. We've had public education programs in other communities, and I would say we've had spotty response. Actually, I've cross-examined the heck out of some people that kept with their waters. You can have a water softener. It just can't be one that recharges the sewer system. And some folks, I kind of like that really slippery feeling, and new water doesn't give me that unless they still soften it. And okay, but let's go over to the cartridge type. Let us not buy 50-pound bags of salt at the grocery store. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the city just bans the sale of bulk salt. People can still go out of town to get it and bring it in. Go to Costco. Yeah, but at least it isn't readily available there as an attractive nuisance. It's one of the things that is said. You're absolutely right. And if someone was actually keeping track of the numbers, when we went over to here, hey, wait a minute, that should be 1,600. No, I took off 100 thinking we would get members of the community with our public education program to cut back a little bit. So that is say I took 100 just for what you're bringing up.
Thank you.
Richard, you gave an excellent
Okay, moving on to the question.
program tonight. You've outlined many variables, and I think you're right in taking the tack of looking very seriously at the DMC, because it makes the most sense. It's going to, well, you pay $49 more or something like that, but you're going to stop paying $15 to $20 more buying salt. And so your cost per EDU is not as high as a lot of them would think it to be. So, I mean, you don't have a swamp, but you do have something to help it, which makes it a little more palatable. I agree with your idea or your proposal that the city should look very seriously at where all these BODs and these salinities are coming from. It might take it have to be done on a business by business basis with your sampling and things like this, but then you will finally, once and for all, have a handle on where your problems are, so you can then go back, like you say, to the regional board and say, here's what we have, here's what we know. We don't want your generalities, or we're going to spend $100 million because you think we got 3,500 parts per million. We only got this, this, and this, and here's where it's coming from, and here's where it's taking. Then that would lead me also to where the city should look seriously at the surcharges for the wastewater based on what their discharges are. I don't know how they are set up right now, but maybe they are. But that would be something they could look at too. So if you're a big contributor to the problem, you pay more for the problem.
Absolutely.
But you did an excellent job. I'm real pleased with what you've done for the city of Newman and how you've presented this. It's something that the city really and the people really need.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Questions?
Nope.
I'll give it back. Okay. Ernie gets it.
Honoring the microphone, I think
It's for the camera.
okay. Manny Souza, 1006 6th Street, Modesto. Rich, I know you've been charged with focusing on the salt problem. I just want to ask a question simply as a point of information. I believe one of your diagrams indicated that the existing plant is adequately handling the existing hydraulic loads of the existing flows. Is that correct?
Yes, I think if Ernie's here and can speak for Lance, who's not Michael, I think that he would be saying, you know, we went through a pretty wet year last year, and I was feeling a little tight. So at roughly the 1.2 MGD, Ernie, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if Lance were here to say, you know, in a typical year, I'm okay, but in a wet year, you know, I'm actually probably a little tight. If I'm going to have a safety factor, so if someone told me, again, I wasn't charged with looking at that detail, but so far everything staff has told me has been right on money. I'd be saying, actually, you know, the plant we got out there today to be really reliable through 100-year type event, we ought to have a little more storage, ought to have a little more land. So I'd say, my answer would be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ernie, I think staff would be saying, no, we actually are feeling a smidge tight. Now, if we could get back some of that 55 we had to surrender that's over the A line, you know, that would help out. And we did some work with the regional board at the Landau level, which is the AEO for, you know, the one step below the big dog, on this issue. And it may well be that with a proper evidence that we would be able to irrigate within a 200-foot lateral buffer of that drain line and not have it be declared an NPDES discharge. I think that some members of the audience have been thinking, now let me get this straight. So this is a big old surface water, subsurface drainage thing. You know, Rich, haven't you ever heard of soil drains? We have them all over the place. Why don't you drain the soil? Well, the answer is that Landau and I, 20 years ago, he was a senior then, not an AEO, but we've been through this at the city of Brentwood, West Covina as well. And if you actually put in a mechanical engineered drain system to specifically facilitate disposal of effluent, that drainage water is an NPDES discharge regulated at the point of discharge. And ladies and gentlemen, we don't want to go there. So we're just, because I think it's one of those questions, so why don't we just drain the soil out there? Can't do that. Did that once. I'm still stinging from that beating too.
Any further questions from the audience? Council, final comments? Anyone? Looks not.
It's a $20 million
Professor,
question.
thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your great presentation. Let's take a 5-minute break.